Welcome to Dark Character Profiler. Take a deep dive into the background and personalities of villains from books, video games, manga, and comics. Psychological analysis of some of the most deviant and heinous characters of all time. Now, here's Fulcrum.
Before we get started, I wanted to give a big shout out to my amazing dad for helping me craft the perfect intro and outro for my podcast. Your creativity and support mean the world to me. And for everyone tuning in, don't forget to check out his incredible show, The Never Ending Radio Show, bringing you timeless music and timeless principles. His show is linked in the description below. Thanks, Dad, for always inspiring and helping me elevate my game. Stay tuned at the end of this episode to get a glimpse of the audiobook, A Kingdom of Ash and Steam, The Ogress's Son, an action-adventure, sci-fi, and steampunk novel written by Paige Zaplendam and narrated by Rich Fraser. A link to the audiobook will also be provided in the episode description. The sight of Professor Umbridge approaching sent a shiver down my spine. Her saccharine smile, plastered on her face like a grotesque mask, sent a wave of nausea washing over me. The cloying sweetness of her perfume, a sickly concoction of roses, and something vaguely medicinal filled the air, making it difficult to breathe. Even her voice, a high-pitched, girlish giggle, grated on my nerves. Those infamous pink gloves adorned with cat motifs seemed to twitch and writhe as she moved, a constant reminder of the oppressive regime that had descended upon Hogwarts. Every inch of her presence seemed designed to be unsettling. Her kittenish aesthetic, a parody of femininity, was a constant assault on the senses. The sickly sweet pastels, the forced cheerfulness, it all felt like a deliberate attempt to crush any hint of individuality or joy. To be near her was to be suffocated by a wave of forced optimism and control. But it wasn't just her unsettling demeanor that filled me with dread. It was the constant fear of her punishments. Every lesson was a minefield, every word scrutinized, every dissenting opinion met with withering disapproval. To speak out against her was to invite her wrath, a punishment ranging from humiliating public reprimands to soul-crushing detentions. The mere thought of spending hours copying lines of parchment under her watchful gaze, her saccharine smile never wavering, made my blood run cold. Now, I would like to give you all a little bit of a character background on Professor Umbridge. So, Professor Umbridge's full name is Dolores Jane Umbridge. She was born to a father who was a wizard and a mother who was a muggle. She also had a muggle brother. She absolutely despised both her mother and her brother, considering them to be lesser than herself and her father. When she joined Hogwarts, Professor Umbridge was sorted into the House of Slytherin. As she grew older, she actually became embarrassed by her father's low position at the Ministry of Magic. And when she became a member of the ministry, she actually rose through the ranks pretty quickly and decided that she was going to try to basically forget about her father and try to rewrite her family history to make it seem as though she came from a more prestigious family. She would often adhere to extremely strict rules, even when they would be considered unjust. Eventually, she became a powerful figure at the ministry and had significant influence. At one point, she was appointed by the Minister of Magic as the High Inquisitor at Hogwarts. During her time there, she prevented students from learning Defense Against the Dark Arts in practice and taught it theoretically instead. So the students weren't actually learning spells, they were just learning about the spells. They weren't being taught how to use them. She also ended up replacing Professor Dumbledore as the head of Hogwarts and named herself the headmistress in his place. And she essentially became an absolute tyrant. She replaced all of the curriculum in the school to focus on obedience and ministry propaganda rather than actual learning that the students would need once they got out into the real magical world. Her actions at Hogwarts actually contributed to resistance against ministry control, further alienating much of the magical community from the ministry. And eventually, after the whole business with Lord Voldemort, she was imprisoned in Azkaban. Now I would like to move on to her personality traits. Professor Umbridge's personality traits include cruel and oppressive behavior. She's very hypocritical. She has a weird obsession with the color pink. She absolutely desires power. She lacks genuine connections with other individuals. She's very manipulative and self-serving. She absolutely abuses authority that is given to her. And she's very suppressive and obsessive. Now I would like to move on to the poll review, the evidence review, and the final analysis for Professor Umbridge. This podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. While we use the DSM-5 as a framework to provide psychological analyses of fictional characters, the discussions are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide professional mental health advice. The interpretations shared are based on hypothetical scenarios and creative exploration and should not be applied to actual individuals or situations. For mental health concerns or diagnoses, please consult a licensed professional. Listener discretion is advised. In the last episode, I included a poll for everyone to vote on what you all thought Professor Umbridge's final analysis would be. Narcissistic personality disorder had the most votes. Obsessive-compulsive personality disorder came in second, and other came in third. Bipolar and antisocial personality disorder received 0 votes. Stay tuned after we explore her crimes and evidence to find out what the final analysis came out to be for Professor Umbridge. The evidence against Professor Umbridge is pretty stacked. She would often use educational decrees to strip students and teachers of their rights and freedoms. She would employ harsh punishments, including physical and emotional abuse against students who resisted her authority. One such method was the use of the blood quill, which Harry used quite often during his detentions with Professor Umbridge, where she would have him write lines using his quill, and the quill would then burn the lines into Harry's hand. She also suppressed free thought and independent learning and sought to control every aspect of Hogwarts. She preached obedience while engaging in manipulative and underhanded tactics. She was obsessively fond of the color pink, using it to create a sickly sweet and unsettling aesthetic. She was very grandiose. She exhibited an inflated sense of self-importance, believing that she was superior to others and deserved special treatment. She absolutely lacked any kind of empathy. She shows a complete disregard for the feelings and needs of others, often causing significant emotional distress. She has a need for admiration. Professor Umbridge craves constant praise and attention, using her position of power to manipulate and control those around her. She also exhibits exploitative behaviors, such as she consistently exploits others for her own personal gain, for example, imposing cruel punishments on the students. She has a preoccupation with order and control. Professor Umbridge is fixated on rigid rules, strict decorum, and maintaining absolute control of her environment. For example, the numerous educational decrees that she would implement throughout her time at Hogwarts. She is also an extreme perfectionist. She shows an excessive concern with appearance, behavior, and order, sometimes to the detriment of her ability to adapt. She is absolutely inflexible. Her ability to compromise or tolerate differences is evident in her interactions with both the students and other staff members. She also displays a disregard for the rights of others, using punishments like the blood quill without regard for the physical or emotional harm that it causes. She also displays manipulative behavior, using her position to exploit, intimidate, and control others for her own benefit. And last, she's very deceitful, presenting herself as sweet and kind while harboring a cruel and controlling nature. Next, we will dive into what all of this evidence means in regards to Professor Umbridge's final analysis. Now that we've gone through the evidence, we will explore the final analysis for Professor Umbridge. Let me know in the comments if you guessed it right. The first final analysis that we have for Professor Umbridge is narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, and lack of empathy, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts. The second analysis for Professor Umbridge was obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is a pervasive pattern of preoccupation with orderliness, perfectionism, and mental and interpersonal control at the expense of flexibility, openness, and efficiency beginning in early adulthood. For Professor Umbridge, though, this may have begun in her childhood rather than in her early adulthood. And the final analysis, yes, there are 3, is antisocial personality disorder, which is a pervasive pattern and disregard for and violation of the rights of others occurring since age 15. The individual is at least 18 years old. There's evidence of conduct disorder with onset before the age of 15, and the occurrence of antisocial behavior is not exclusively during the course of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are not applicable in Professor Umbridge's case. Conduct disorder is a repetitive and persistent pattern of behavior in which the basic rights of others or major age-appropriate societal norms or rules are violated, including aggression toward people and animals, destruction of property, deceitfulness and theft, and a serious violation of rules. With Professor Umbridge being sorted into the House of Slytherin, it's kind of implied, we could say, that these characteristics would be applicable from conduct disorder. And before we wrap up, I want to go through some interesting facts about Professor Umbridge. The first interesting, but maybe predictable fact about Professor Umbridge is that her Patronus is a cat. She persecuted Muggleborns. She wore Slytherin's locket, which she received as a bribe from Mundungus Fletcher. She hated centaurs due to her own actions and prejudices. She had a strong disdain for Professor Dumbledore. She had an intense hatred for half-breeds, such as Hagrid and centaurs. She's unskilled in practical defense against the dark arts. And last but not least, but also pretty obvious, she dislikes children. And now I would like to wrap things up. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.
Humanity was not meant to live this way. Society is left to the mercy of murderers and cutthroats. Hear Paige Zaplin Dam's epic tale brought to life in an audiobook. For years, Slade had felt secure in the forest. I am from simple, humble beginnings. I was raised in the Ironwood by an Ogress, an Anaral. He saw immediately that she was beyond a healer's aid. Even a skilled witch could not help her recover from losing so much blood. Mother? Slade thought he wanted revenge. Instead, he got redemption. A kingdom of ash and steam, The Ogress's Son, a dystopian neo-Dark Age fantasy, narrated by Rich Fraser. Now available on iTunes and Audible. I promise you I will find whoever did this and avenge you, Mother.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I truly appreciate your support. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave a comment or review. It helps more listeners discover the podcast. And don't forget to check out the poll linked below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the next episode. All references for this episode are listed in the description, so feel free to explore further. You can also follow us on Instagram or X. You can also join our Discord channel to stay connected and join the conversation. All are linked in the episode description below. Until next time, take care and keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Dark Character Profiler with Fulcrum. Listen every other Tuesday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts.